A young American woman married an Arab millionaire, dreaming of a life filled with luxury and love. But shortly after the wedding, he locked her in the basement of his mansion. Desperate, she found an unexpected way to attempt her escape. Emily Bennett stood at the edge of the crystal-clear Caribbean waters, her toes sinking into the warm white sand. The sun kissed her skin, and a gentle breeze tousled her auburn hair. At 28, she was taking her first real vacation in years, a much-needed break from her demanding job as a nurse in Boston. Little did she know that this idyllic getaway would be the catalyst for a life-altering journey. As she strolled along the shoreline, lost in thought about her patients back home, she nearly collided with a tall, striking man emerging from the water. His olive skin glistened in the sunlight, and his dark eyes twinkled with amusement. "I'm so sorry," Emily exclaimed, taking a step back. The man's lips curved into a charming smile. "No need to apologize. It's not every day I'm fortunate enough to bump into a beautiful woman on the beach." His voice was rich and accented, hinting at an exotic background that immediately piqued Emily's curiosity. "I'm Khalid," he said, extending his hand. "And you are?" "Emily," she replied, shaking his hand and feeling an unexpected spark at his touch. "Nice to meet you, Khalid." They fell into easy conversation, walking along the beach as the sun began to set. Khalid was charismatic and worldly, regaling Emily with stories of his travels and business ventures. He was, she learned, a successful entrepreneur from Saudi Arabia, with interests in technology and renewable energy. As they talked, Emily found herself captivated not just by Khalid's good looks and charm, but by his passion for making a difference in the world. He spoke of his projects to bring sustainable energy to remote villages and his dreams of revolutionizing healthcare technology. "You know, Emily," Khalid said, his eyes twinkling, "I have a feeling our meeting wasn't just chance. I believe in fate, and I think you and I were meant to cross paths." Emily laughed, a blush creeping up her cheeks. "That's a pretty bold statement for someone you just met, don't you think?" Khalid's smile widened. "Perhaps, but I've learned to trust my instincts in business and in life." "They rarely steer me wrong." As the sky turned a vibrant orange, Khalid invited Emily to dinner at an exclusive beachfront restaurant. Against her better judgment, she had always been cautious with men she'd just met. Emily found herself saying yes. The restaurant was like something out of a movie, with candlelit tables set right on the sand, and the sound of gentle waves providing a soothing backdrop. As they dined on exquisite seafood and sipped champagne, Emily felt as though she had stepped into a fairy tale. Khalid was attentive and charming, asking Emily about her life in Boston, her work as a nurse, and her dreams for the future. She found herself opening up to him in a way she never had with anyone before. "I've always wanted to make a real difference in people's lives," she confided. "That's why I became a nurse. But sometimes I feel like I'm just putting band-aids on much bigger problems." Khalid nodded, understanding. "I know exactly what you mean." "It's why I've focused my business efforts on projects that can create lasting change. Have you ever considered working on a larger scale, using your skills to impact entire communities?" Emily's eyes lit up at the idea. "I've thought about it, but I wouldn't even know where to start." "Well," Khalid said, leaning in closer, "I might have a proposition for you." As he began to outline his vision for a state-of-the-art medical facility in Saudi Arabia that would serve people from all walks of life, Emily felt a surge of excitement. It was as if Khalid was offering her the opportunity she'd always dreamed of, but never thought possible. The rest of Emily's vacation passed in a whirlwind of romantic dinners, moonlit walks on the beach, and long conversations about their hopes and dreams. Khalid showed her a world of luxury she had never known: private yacht tours, helicopter rides over the islands, and exclusive access to the most beautiful spots in the Caribbean. On their last night together, Khalid took Emily to a secluded cove. As they stood hand in hand watching the stars reflect off the calm waters, he turned to her with an intense gaze. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I feel a connection with you that I've never experienced before. I don't want this to end when you go back to Boston." Emily's heart raced. She felt the same way, but the practical part of her brain was sending out warning signals. "Khalid, I feel it too, but we live in completely different worlds." How could this possibly work? He took both her hands in his. "Come with me to Saudi Arabia. Be a part of the medical center project. We can make a difference together and see where this relationship takes us." Emily's mind whirled. Leave everything behind. Her job, her family, her life in Boston. It seemed crazy, impulsive, completely out of character for her. "And yet, I don't know what to say," she stammered. Khalid's eyes softened. "You don't have to decide right now. Take some time to think about it. But know this, I believe we could have an extraordinary life together, Emily. A life filled with purpose, adventure, and love." As they made their way back to the hotel, Emily's thoughts were in turmoil. Part of her was thrilled by the prospect of a new life with Khalid, full of possibilities, and the chance to make a real difference. Another part was terrified of leaving everything she knew behind. That night, as she lay in bed, unable to sleep, Emily thought about her life in Boston. It was comfortable, familiar, but was it truly fulfilling? Was she really making the most of her potential? Khalid's offer represented a leap into the unknown, but it also promised the kind of impact and excitement she'd always longed for. As the first rays of dawn peeked through her window, Emily made her decision. She would take the leap. She would go to Saudi Arabia with Khalid. Little did she know that this decision, made in a moment of romantic optimism and dreams of changing the world, would set in motion a series of events that would test her in ways she could never have imagined. The fairy tale was about to take an unexpected turn, and Emily's journey was only just beginning. The private jet touched down on the tarmac of Riyadh's King Khalid International Airport, its engines humming to a halt under the scorching Saudi Arabian sun. Emily's heart raced as she peered out the window, taking in the vast expanse of desert and the glittering skyline in the distance. This was it, the beginning of her new life. Khalid, seated beside her, squeezed her hand "Welcome to your new home, my love," he said, his voice warm with affection. As they disembarked, Emily was struck by the wave of heat that enveloped her. It was unlike anything she had experienced before, dry and intense. A sleek black limousine awaited them on the tarmac, and as they settled into its cool interior, Emily's mind wandered back to the whirlwind of the past few weeks. Leaving Boston had been harder than she'd anticipated. Her parents were shocked by her decision, pleading with her to reconsider. Her colleagues at the hospital were a mix of envious and concerned. But Emily had been resolute, buoyed by Khalid's promises and her own dreams of making a difference on a grander scale. Now, as they drove through the streets of Riyadh, Emily's eyes widened at the juxtaposition of ultra-modern architecture and traditional Islamic designs. Khalid pointed out landmarks, his voice filled with pride as he spoke about his homeland. "And there," he said, gesturing to an impressive complex of buildings, "is where we'll be working on the medical center project." "It's going to revolutionize healthcare in the region." Emily leaned forward, excitement bubbling within her. The facility was even more impressive than Khalid had described. State-of-the-art equipment, world-class researchers, and a mission to provide care to those who needed it most. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. As they approached Khalid's residence, Emily gasped. House was an understatement. It was a palace, sprawling and opulent with lush gardens that seemed to defy the desert climate. "This is where we'll be living?" she asked, awe evident in her voice. Khalid chuckled. "Yes, my dear. I want you to have every comfort while you're here." The next few days were a blur of luxury and new experiences. Emily marveled at the extravagance of her new life. The personal chef who prepared exquisite meals, the team of staff who attended to their every need, the closet full of designer clothes that Khalid had ordered for her. But it wasn't all indulgence. True to his word, Khalid immediately involved Emily in the medical center project. She spent her days in meetings with architects, medical equipment suppliers, and potential staff, her nursing expertise proving invaluable as they planned the facility. In the evenings, Khalid would take her on tours of the city, introducing her to the rich culture and history of Saudi Arabia. They dined in exclusive restaurants, attended cultural events, and even went on a desert safari. Emily felt like she was living in a dream. However, as the weeks passed, subtle changes began to creep into their relationship. It started innocuously enough. Khalid suggested that Emily wear more conservative clothing when they went out in public. "It's just out of respect for local customs," he explained gently when she hesitated. "I want you to feel comfortable and accepted here." Emily agreed, not wanting to cause any cultural misunderstandings. She began wearing loose-fitting clothes and a headscarf when they left the house. It felt strange at first, but she told herself it was part of embracing her new life. Then came the request to limit her social media presence. "Some of my business associates are very traditional," Khalid said. "They might not understand our relationship if they see too much of our personal life online." Again, Emily complied, though a small part of her felt uneasy. She found herself posting less and less, her vibrant Instagram feed slowing to a trickle of carefully curated images. One evening, as they sat in the garden enjoying the cool night air, Khalid broached another subject. "Emily, darling, I've been thinking. Perhaps it would be best if you didn't go out alone for a while." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well, you're still new to the country and I worry about you getting lost or running into trouble." "I can arrange for a driver and a companion to accompany you whenever you need to go out." Emily's initial reaction was to protest, but Khalid's concern seemed genuine, and truthfully, she had found navigating the city on her own a bit daunting. "I suppose that makes sense," she conceded, "just until I get more comfortable with the area." Khalid beamed, pulling her close. "You're so understanding, my love. This is why we're perfect together." As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Emily threw herself into her work at the medical center. The project was challenging and rewarding, allowing her to use her skills in ways she never had before. She was making a real difference, just as she'd always wanted. But outside of work, her world was shrinking. Her outings became less frequent, always chaperoned by Khalid's staff. Her communication with family and friends back home dwindled, partly due to the time difference and partly due to Khalid's subtle discouragement. "Why do you need to call them so often?" he would ask. "Aren't you happy here with me? Don't I give you everything you need?" And in many ways, he did. Emily's life was filled with luxury and purpose. Khalid was attentive and affectionate, showering her with gifts and words of love. Yet there were moments when she felt a gnawing emptiness, a longing for the independence she once had. One night, as they lay in bed, Khalid propped himself up on one elbow, gazing at her intently. "Emily, we've been together for almost a year now. I think it's time we talked about making our relationship official." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was this a proposal? "I want you to be my wife," Khalid continued, "to build a life and a family together. What do you say?" A whirlwind of emotions swept through Emily. Joy, excitement, love, but also a flicker of apprehension. Marriage would mean fully committing to this new life, to this new country and its customs. Was she ready for that? Looking into Khalid's eyes, filled with hope and adoration, Emily pushed her doubts aside. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Khalid's face lit up with happiness. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply. "You've made me the happiest man in the world," he murmured. "I promise you, our life together will be extraordinary." As Emily drifted off to sleep that night, nestled in Khalid's arms, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She was embarking on a new chapter of her life, one that promised love and fulfillment. Yet as she stood on the threshold of this new beginning, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she couldn't quite silence. In gaining this new world, what might she be losing? The wedding was a lavish affair, befitting Khalid's status and wealth. Held in one of Riyadh's most exclusive venues, it was a blend of traditional Saudi customs and modern luxury. Emily, adorned in a breathtaking gown that seamlessly merged Western and Middle Eastern styles, felt like a princess in a fairy tale. As she walked down the aisle, Emily's eyes locked with Khalid's. His gaze, filled with adoration and pride, momentarily quelled the doubts that had been niggling at the back of her mind. This was her happily ever after, wasn't it? The ceremony was followed by a reception that seemed to last for days. Emily was introduced to a dizzying array of Khalid's family members, business associates, and Saudi elites. She smiled and nodded, trying her best to remember names and relationships, all while feeling increasingly out of her depth. It was during a rare moment alone, as she stepped away to catch her breath, that Emily overheard a conversation that sent a chill down her spine. "She seems nice enough," a woman's voice said in Arabic, not realizing Emily could understand bits and pieces after months of lessons. "But do you think she truly understands what she's gotten herself into?" "Probably not," another voice replied. "These American women never do, but Khalid will mold her into a proper wife soon enough." Emily's heart raced. She wanted to confront them, to assert that she knew exactly what she was doing. But did she? The seed of doubt, planted long ago, began to sprout. The honeymoon was a whirlwind tour of Europe's most romantic destinations. Paris, Venice, Santorini, each location more beautiful than the last. Khalid spared no expense, showering Emily with gifts and experiences that took her breath away. Yet, even in these moments of bliss, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Khalid's attentiveness, once charming, began to feel suffocating. He chose her outfits, ordered her meals, and planned every minute of their days. When she expressed a desire to explore on her own, his face would darken. "Why would you want to go anywhere without me?" he'd ask, his tone a mixture of hurt and anger. "Am I not enough for you?" Emily would backtrack, assuring him that of course he was enough. She was just used to more independence, that's all. Khalid would smile, kiss her forehead, and the moment would pass. But the unease lingered. Upon their return to Saudi Arabia, Emily threw herself back into work at the medical center, hoping to recapture the sense of purpose that had first drawn her to this new life. The project was nearing completion, and the impact they were having on the community was undeniable. One afternoon, as Emily was reviewing patient care protocols with the staff, she received an urgent message from Khalid. He wanted her home immediately. Worried, she rushed back to find him pacing in their living room, his face a storm of emotions. "What's wrong?" she asked, reaching for him. Khalid held up his phone, showing her a social media post. It was a photo of Emily at work, smiling with a male colleague. The caption praised her contributions to the medical center. "What is this?" Khalid demanded. "Why are you taking photos with other men, and who gave you permission to be featured in this post?" Emily was taken aback. "Khalid, it's just a professional photo. The PR team thought it would be good for the center's image." "I didn't think—" "That's right, you didn't think," Khalid's voice rose. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look? My wife, plastered all over the internet, smiling with another man?" "But it's not like that at all," Emily protested. "It's completely innocent. I was just doing my job." Khalid's eyes narrowed. "Your job is to be my wife, to honor and obey me." "Have you forgotten that so quickly?" The words hit Emily like a physical blow. This wasn't the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had encouraged her ambitions and praised her independence. "I think," Khalid said, his voice dangerously calm, "that it's time you stepped back from the medical center. You've done enough." It's time to focus on your duties at home." Emily felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "But the project, it's not finished. They need me." "I need you," Khalid countered. "Our future family needs you. Isn't that more important?" Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She wanted to argue, to fight for the work that had given her such meaning. But the look in Khalid's eyes told her it would be futile. Slowly, she nodded. "Good," Khalid said, his demeanor softening. He pulled her into an embrace. "You'll see, my love. This is for the best. I only want what's right for you. For us." As Emily buried her face in Khalid's chest, inhaling his familiar scent, she felt a profound sense of loss. It was as if a door was closing, locking away a part of herself she had cherished. In the days that followed, Emily's world contracted further. Khalid insisted on controlling her phone and internet access, citing concerns about her online reputation. Her outings became less frequent, always under the watchful eye of Khalid or his staff. She tried to reach out to her family, to share her growing concerns, but found herself constantly interrupted or monitored. The few times she managed to speak with her mother, she found herself downplaying her situation, not wanting to worry her or admit that perhaps she had made a terrible mistake. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Khalid broached the subject of children. "It's time we started our family," he said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "A child will give you purpose now that you're no longer working." Emily felt a mix of emotions, excitement at the prospect of motherhood, but also a deep-seated fear. A child would tie her to this life irrevocably. I'm not sure I'm ready," she ventured cautiously. Khalid's face hardened. "Ready?" "My dear, this is what a wife does. This is your duty. Or are you going to deny me this as well?" The implication was clear. Emily's desires, her readiness, were secondary to Khalid's wishes. As she looked into his eyes, once so full of love and now clouded with expectation and demand, Emily realized with startling clarity that the fairy tale she had imagined was crumbling around her. She was no princess in a castle. She was a bird in a gilded cage, her wings clipped, her song silenced. And as the cool night air settled around them, Emily wondered with a growing sense of desperation if she would ever find a way to fly free again. Months passed, and Emily's world continued to shrink. The opulent mansion that had once felt like a palace now seemed more like a prison. Her days were filled with a monotonous routine of household management and social engagements carefully curated by Khalid. The vibrant, ambitious nurse who had dreamed of changing the world was fading, replaced by a shadow of her former self. Despite her initial reluctance, Emily found herself pregnant within a few months of their conversation in the garden. The news brought a mix of emotions, joy at the prospect of motherhood, but also a deepening sense of entrapment. Khalid was elated, showering her with attention and gifts. For a brief moment, Emily allowed herself to hope that this might be the turning point, that the man she had fallen in love with would re-emerge. However, as her pregnancy progressed, Khalid's controlling behavior only intensified. He micromanaged every aspect of her prenatal care, insisting on a team of doctors that reported directly to him. Emily's diet, exercise routine, and daily activities were all strictly regulated. Any attempt to assert her own wishes was met with stern disapproval. "This isn't just about you anymore," Khalid would say, his voice a mixture of concern and reproach. "You're carrying my heir. We must ensure everything is perfect." Emily's pregnancy became a lonely journey. She longed to share this experience with her family and friends back home, but her communication with the outside world had been reduced to brief, monitored phone calls and carefully worded emails. The joy of impending motherhood was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of isolation. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the nursery Khalid had commissioned, a room that looked more like a royal chamber than a baby's bedroom, she found herself weeping silently. She cradled her swollen belly, whispering promises to her unborn child. "I'll find a way to give you the life you deserve," she murmured. A life of freedom and love, not control and fear. It was in that moment of vulnerability that Amira, one of the household staff, entered the room. The young woman hesitated, clearly unsure if she should intrude on this private moment. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Emily," Amira said softly. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Emily quickly wiped away her tears, forcing a smile. "It's all right, Amira." "Please come in." Amira moved to tidy the room, but her eyes kept darting back to Emily with concern. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Emily, are you truly happy here?" The question, so simple yet so loaded, caught Emily off guard. For months she had been putting on a brave face, convincing herself as much as others that she was living the life she wanted. But faced with Amira's gentle inquiry, the facade crumbled. "No," Emily admitted, her voice breaking. "No, I'm not happy." Amira looked around nervously before approaching Emily. "I have seen many women like you," she said quietly. "Foreign wives who come here dreaming of love and adventure. But the reality, it is not always what they expect." Emily felt a glimmer of hope at finding someone who understood her plight. "What do they do?" she asked. "How do they cope?" Amira's expression was a mixture of sympathy and caution. Some accept their fate. Others, they find ways to reclaim small pieces of themselves. But it is not easy, and it is not without risk. Before Emily could press for more details, they heard footsteps approaching. Amira quickly resumed her cleaning, and Emily composed herself just as Khalid entered the room. "Ah, there you are, my dear," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I hope you're not tiring yourself out." "Remember what the doctor said about rest." Emily nodded obediently, but inside a spark had been ignited. The brief conversation with Amira had reminded her of who she used to be, a woman of strength and determination. She realized that for the sake of her child, she needed to find a way to reclaim her identity and her freedom. As her due date approached, Emily began to plan. She started by feigning increased fatigue, using it as an excuse to spend more time alone. In these moments of solitude, she would scour the internet for information on women's rights in Saudi Arabia and resources for those in abusive relationships. She was careful to delete her browsing history, aware that Khalid monitored her online activities. Emily also began to cultivate a closer relationship with Amira and a few other sympathetic staff members. Through subtle conversations, she pieced together a clearer picture of her rights, or lack thereof, as a foreign wife in Saudi Arabia. The information was daunting, but Emily refused to let it defeat her. The birth of her son Zayn brought a new wave of complex emotions. The love she felt for her child was overwhelming, but it was tinged with fear for his future. Would he grow up to be like his father? How could she protect him from the toxic environment she found herself in? Khalid's behavior in the weeks following Zayn's birth was erratic. At times he was the doting father and husband, showering them both with affection. At other times he was distant and irritable, especially when Zayn's cries interrupted his sleep or work. One night, as Emily was nursing Zayn, Khalid entered the nursery, his face thunderous. "Can't you keep him quiet?" he snapped. "I have an important conference call in the morning and I need my rest." Emily tried to soothe both her son and her husband. "I'm sorry, Khalid. He's just hungry." "I'll try to be quicker." Khalid's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps we should hire a night nurse. Clearly you're not capable of handling this on your own." The words stung, but Emily saw an opportunity. A night nurse might provide her with more freedom, more chances to plan. "If you think that's best," she said meekly. As Khalid left the room, satisfied with her acquiescence, Emily looked down at her son. In his innocent face she saw hope for a better future for both of them. She knew then that she couldn't wait any longer. For Zayn's sake, she had to find a way out, but escaping from a man as powerful and controlling as Khalid wouldn't be easy. Emily knew she would need help, resources, and most of all, courage. As she held her son close, she made a silent vow. No matter what it took, she would find a way to break free from this gilded cage and give Zayn the life of freedom and love he deserved. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, but for the first time in months, Emily felt a sense of purpose and determination. The fighter in her, long suppressed, was reawakening, and with it came the first glimmer of hope for a new beginning. The arrival of the night nurse, a stern woman named Fatima, brought both relief and new challenges for Emily. While it afforded her more time to rest and plan, it also meant another set of watchful eyes in the house. Fatima, it seemed, reported every detail of Emily and Zayn's nighttime routines directly to Khalid. Despite this, Emily was determined to use every opportunity to her advantage. She began to feign sleep problems, using them as an excuse to wander the house at night. During these nocturnal explorations, she carefully mapped out the security systems, noted the guards' rotations, and searched for potential escape routes. One night, as she was examining the lock on a rarely used side door, Emily heard a soft cough behind her. Her heart leaped into her throat as she turned, fearing Khalid had caught her. Instead, she found herself face to face with Hassan, the elderly gardener. "Mrs. Emily," he said softly, his weathered face creased with concern. "It is not safe for you to be wandering at night." Emily's mind raced, searching for an excuse, but something in Hassan's eyes stopped her. There was understanding there and perhaps a hint of sympathy. I can't stay here anymore, Hassan," she whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I need to leave, for Zayn's sake and my own." Hassan nodded slowly, unsurprised. "I have seen the change in you, Mrs. Emily. The light in your eyes has dimmed." He glanced around nervously before continuing. I cannot directly help you, but I can tell you this. There are organizations that assist women in your situation. Look for them. With that cryptic advice, Hassan shuffled away, leaving Emily with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She realized that her silent plea for help had been heard, and perhaps there were more allies in this household than she had imagined. Over the next few weeks, Emily redoubled her efforts. During her allowed internet time, always under the guise of researching childcare tips, she discreetly searched for women's rights organizations operating in Saudi Arabia. She memorized contact information and procedures, knowing she couldn't risk writing anything down. Meanwhile, her relationship with Khalid continued to deteriorate. His controlling behavior escalated, now extending to every aspect of Zayn's upbringing. He criticized Emily's parenting constantly, undermining her confidence and asserting his authority over every decision. "You're too soft with him," Khalid would say. "He needs to learn discipline from an early age." "This is how we raise strong men in our culture." Emily would bite her tongue, fighting back tears as she watched Khalid impose his harsh ideas on their infant son. Every such incident strengthened her resolve to escape. The opportunity Emily had been waiting for came unexpectedly. Khalid announced he would be traveling for business for a week, an unprecedented length of time to be away from his tightly controlled household. "I expect everything to run smoothly in my absence," he told Emily sternly. "Fatima will oversee Zayn's care, and Ahmed will manage the house. You are to rest and focus on regaining your strength." "I want you in perfect health when I return." Emily nodded demurely, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. This could be her chance, but she knew she had to be careful. One wrong move could shatter any hope of escape. The night after Khalid left, Emily put her plan into action. She waited until the house was quiet, Zayn asleep in his crib and Fatima dozing in the rocking chair. With trembling hands, she retrieved the burner phone she had managed to purchase through a complex series of secret transactions. Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number she had memorized weeks ago. After several agonizing rings, a woman's voice answered in Arabic. "This is the Women's Rights Assistance Hotline. How may we help you?" Emily's voice shook as she responded in halting Arabic. "My name is Emily Bennett. I'm an American citizen being held against my will by my husband in Riyadh. Please, I need help escaping with my son." The woman on the other end of the line was calm and professional, asking Emily a series of questions to assess her situation. As Emily provided details, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she was taking concrete action towards her freedom. "Mrs. Bennett, we understand your situation," the woman said finally. "We can help you, but you must understand the risks. Attempting to leave with your child will be extremely dangerous. Are you certain this is what you want?" Emily looked at Zayn, sleeping peacefully in his crib. She thought of the life that awaited him under Khalid's oppressive control, of the woman she had become, a shell of her former self. Her resolve hardened. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm certain. Please, tell me what I need to do." The woman proceeded to outline a daring escape plan. It would require precise timing, courage, and more than a little luck. Emily listened intently, committing every detail to memory. She knew this might be her only chance. As she ended the call and carefully hid the phone, Emily felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time she felt a sense of hope. Looking at her sleeping son, Emily whispered a promise. "We're going to be free, Zane." Mommy's going to make sure of it. With Khalid gone and a plan in place, Emily began to prepare for the most important journey of her life. She knew the next few days would determine everything: her future, Zane's future, and whether she would ever taste freedom again. As dawn broke over Riyadh, casting long shadows across the luxurious prison that had been her home, Emily steeled herself for what was to come. The game had changed, and now, finally, she was ready to play for keeps. The next few days were a delicate balancing act for Emily. She had to maintain an appearance of normalcy while secretly preparing for her escape. Every moment was filled with tension, knowing that one misstep could unravel everything. Emily began by slowly gathering essential items: clothes, diapers, formula for Zayn, hiding them in a bag she kept concealed in a rarely used linen closet. She was careful to take only what was necessary, knowing that too much missing at once might raise suspicions. The escape plan hinged on timing and outside help. The women's rights organization had arranged for a trusted driver to pick them up at a precise location and time. From there, they would be taken to a safe house before being smuggled out of the country. The complexity of the plan terrified Emily, but she knew it was her only chance. As the day of escape drew near, Emily's nerves were frayed to the breaking point. She jumped at every sound, convinced that Khalid would return early or that someone in the household had discovered her plans. Zayn, sensing his mother's anxiety, became fussy and difficult to console. The night before the planned escape, Emily lay awake, her mind racing. Doubt crept in, whispering insidious thoughts. Was she doing the right thing? Could she really deprive Zayn of his father, his heritage? But then she remembered Khalid's controlling behavior, his harsh words, the suffocating atmosphere of fear and submission. No, she told herself firmly, this was the only way to give Zayn a chance at a normal, happy life. As dawn broke on the day of escape, Emily went through her morning routine as usual, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She fed Zayn, changed him, and played with him, all while watching the clock tick slowly towards the appointed hour. At precisely 10:30 a.m., Emily put Zayn down for his morning nap. This was the moment she had been waiting for. With shaking hands, she retrieved the hidden bag and quickly dressed Zayn in warm clothes. She penned a brief note to Amira, thanking her for her kindness and asking her not to raise the alarm immediately. Just as Emily was about to leave the nursery, she heard footsteps approaching. Panic seized her as she recognized Fatima's gait. Thinking quickly, she lay down next to Zayn's crib, feigning sleep. Fatima entered the room, tutting softly at the sight of Emily sleeping on the job, but instead of waking her, the night nurse simply adjusted the blanket over Emily and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Emily waited for several agonizing minutes, listening intently for any sound of suspicion or alarm. When none came, she gathered Zayn in her arms, grabbed the bag, and made her way towards the side door she had scouted weeks ago. As she reached for the handle, a voice behind her made her freeze. "Mrs. Emily?" She turned slowly, her heart in her throat, to see Hassan standing there, a mixture of sadness and understanding on his face. "Please," Emily whispered, clutching Zayn tightly. "Please don't stop me." Hassan regarded her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The cameras on this side of the house will be down for maintenance for the next 10 minutes, he said softly. "May Allah protect you and the little one." Tears of gratitude sprang to Emily's eyes as she realized Hassan was giving her a precious gift, a clear path to freedom. With a grateful nod, she slipped out the door and into the bright Riyadh morning. The heat hit her like a wall as she hurried down the street, trying to look as natural as possible while her heart raced. Zayn mercifully remained quiet, perhaps sensing the gravity of the situation. As she rounded the corner to the pickup point, Emily saw the nondescript car waiting for her, just as promised. A woman in a hijab beckoned urgently from the passenger seat. Emily quickened her pace, freedom tantalizingly close, but just as she reached for the car door, she heard a shout behind her. "Mrs. Emily, stop!" She turned to see Ahmed, the house manager, running towards her, his face a mask of confusion and anger. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Emily knew she had a split second to decide: give up and return to her gilded cage, or take the final irrevocable step towards freedom. With a surge of determination, Emily yanked open the car door and jumped in, clutching Zayn tightly to her chest. "Go!" she yelled to the driver, who needed no further encouragement. The car peeled away from the curb, leaving Ahmed shouting and waving his arms in the rearview mirror. As they sped through the streets of Riyadh, Emily's emotions overwhelmed her. She wept silently, tears of fear, relief, and hope mingling as she held Zayn close. The woman beside her offered quiet words of comfort in Arabic, assuring her that they were heading somewhere safe. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she and Zayn might have a chance at a new life. But she knew their journey was far from over. Khalid's influence was vast, and his rage at her escape would be terrible. The road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. As the car wound its way through back streets and alleyways, eventually pulling into a nondescript garage in an unfamiliar part of the city, Emily steeled herself for what was to come. She had taken the first step towards freedom, but the hardest part of her journey was just beginning. The safe house was a modest apartment in a nondescript building on the outskirts of Riyadh. As Emily was ushered inside by her rescuers, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was a fugitive now, hiding from a man whose power and influence stretched far beyond the borders of Saudi Arabia. Fatima, the woman who had been in the car, introduced herself properly. She was a caseworker for the women's rights organization and would be Emily's primary contact during this precarious time. "You're safe for now," Fatima assured her, "but we must move quickly. Khalid will use every resource at his disposal to find you and Zayn." Over the next few days, Emily lived in a state of constant anxiety. Every sound outside the apartment made her jump, convinced that Khalid or his men had found them. Zain, picking up on his mother's stress, became fussy and difficult to console. Fatima worked tirelessly to arrange their escape from the country. It was a complex operation involving forged documents, bribes, and a network of sympathetic individuals willing to risk everything to help a mother and child find freedom. "We've secured passage for you on a cargo ship leaving Jeddah," Fatima explained on the third day. "It's not ideal, but it's our best chance of getting you out undetected." Emily nodded, willing to endure any hardship if it meant freedom for her and Zain. But as she packed the few belongings they had, a new worry gnawed at her. What kind of life awaited them? Always looking over their shoulders, never feeling truly safe. The journey to Jeddah was a nightmare of tension and close calls. They traveled by night in a series of different vehicles, often hiding under blankets or in secret compartments when passing through checkpoints. Zain, mercifully, slept through much of it, but Emily's nerves were frayed to the breaking point. As they approached the port of Jeddah, Emily's heart sank. News of her escape had spread, and Khalid had mobilized his considerable resources. Port security had been tightened, and Emily saw her husband's face plastered on wanted posters everywhere. "How can we possibly get through?" she whispered to Fatima, clutching Zain close. Fatima's face was grim but determined. "We have one last trick up our sleeve. But Emily, you must understand, this is incredibly risky. If we're caught—" Emily cut her off. "I understand." But we've come too far to turn back now. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Emily would pose as a member of the ship's crew, with Zain hidden in a specially designed compartment in her luggage. It was dangerous. If Zain cried or made any noise, they would be discovered instantly. As they approached the final checkpoint, Emily's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She handed over her forged documents with trembling hands, praying that Zain would remain quiet just a little longer. The guard scrutinized her papers, then looked at her face. Emily felt a bead of sweat trickle down her back. This was it. They were about to be caught. But then, miraculously, the guard nodded and waved her through. Emily forced herself to walk calmly, fighting the urge to run. Only when she was safely on board the ship, Zain back in her arms, did she allow herself to breathe. As the ship pulled away from the port, Emily stood on the deck, watching the lights of Jeddah recede. She felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, fear, sadness, and hope all swirling together. "We did it, Zain," she whispered to her son, who gurgled happily in response. "We're free." But even as she said the words, Emily knew their journey was far from over. They were heading into an uncertain future with no money, no support system, and a powerful, angry man determined to find them. The ship's destination was a small port in East Africa, from where Emily and Zain would need to make their way back to the United States. It would be a long, difficult journey, fraught with its own dangers and challenges. As the coast of Saudi Arabia disappeared over the horizon, Emily made a silent vow. No matter what hardships lay ahead, no matter how long it took, she would build a new life for herself and Zain. A life of freedom, love, and opportunity. Everything she had once dreamed of, and everything she wanted for her son. The sea breeze whipped around them, carrying the salt spray and the promise of new beginnings. Emily held Zane close, her mind already racing with plans and possibilities. They had taken the first crucial step. Now, they just had to keep moving forward, one day at a time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. They had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds to get this far. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was determined to face them head-on. For the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to smile, a genuine, hopeful smile. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape, and that, she realized, was the greatest freedom of all. The journey across the Red Sea was a test of endurance for Emily and Zane. The cargo ship, not designed for passengers, offered little in the way of comfort. They were hidden in a small, stuffy cabin, constantly aware that discovery could mean disaster. Emily spent her days caring for Zane, trying to keep him quiet and content in their confined space. At night, she would creep up to the deck, breathing in the salty air and watching the stars, allowing herself to dream of the future. After what felt like an eternity, but was in reality just over a week, the ship docked at a small port in Djibouti. Emily's heart raced as she prepared to disembark. This was another crucial moment. If anyone recognized them or questioned their presence, everything could fall apart. Fatima had arranged for a local contact to meet them at the port. As Emily scanned the crowd, clutching Zayn tightly, she spotted a woman holding a sign with a seemingly random series of numbers, the code they had agreed upon. "Salam," the woman said softly as Emily approached. "I am Aisha. Come quickly, we don't have much time." Aisha led them through the bustling port to a waiting car. As they drove through the dusty streets of Djibouti city, she explained the next phase of their journey. "We've secured temporary papers for you," Aisha said, handing Emily a manila envelope. "You'll fly to Nairobi tonight, then on to Amsterdam." "From there, you should be able to reach the United States." Emily's head spun at the complexity of the plan. "How is this all possible?" she asked, overwhelmed by the network of people working to help her. Aisha smiled sadly. "There are many women like you, Emily, and many people who believe in fighting for freedom. We do what we can." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of airports, security checkpoints, and nervous waits. Each step of the journey was fraught with tension, as Emily constantly feared that Khalid's influence would catch up with them. In Nairobi, there was a heart-stopping moment when a security officer studied their papers for what seemed like an eternity. In Amsterdam, Emily was certain she spotted one of Khalid's business associates and spent an agonizing hour hiding in a bathroom stall with Zayn. But somehow, against all odds, they made it. As the plane touched down at JFK International Airport in New York, Emily felt tears streaming down her face. They had done it, they were in America. However, their challenges were far from over. As Emily made her way through customs, she realized the full weight of her situation. She was back in her home country, yes, but she had no money, no job, and no place to go. And looming over everything was the knowledge that Khalid would not give up easily. Emily's first stop was the American Embassy, where she reported her situation and sought help. The process was long and often frustrating, filled with interviews, paperwork, and legal complexities. But slowly, things began to fall into place. The embassy connected Emily with organizations that helped victims of domestic abuse and human trafficking. She was provided with temporary housing, legal aid, and counseling services. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily began to feel a sense of control over her life, but the specter of Khalid still loomed large. Emily knew that his wealth and connections meant he could potentially reach her even here. She lived in constant fear, jumping at every unexpected sound, scrutinizing every stranger on the street. Weeks turned into months. Emily found a job at a local clinic, slowly rebuilding her nursing career. Zain, now a toddler, was thriving in daycare, his laughter a balm to Emily's troubled soul. They were building a new life, day by day, but the shadow of the past never fully receded. Then, nearly a year after their escape, the news Emily had been dreading arrived. Her lawyer called with grim news. Khalid had filed for custody of Zain in Saudi Arabia and was seeking to have the ruling enforced internationally. "He's claiming you kidnapped Zain," the lawyer explained gently. "Given Saudi Arabia's laws regarding custody, he has a strong case in their system." Emily felt the world spinning around her. After everything they had been through, after all the progress they had made, it could all be undone. The thought of losing Zain, of him being taken back to the life she had fought so hard to escape, was unbearable. But as the initial shock wore off, Emily felt a steely determination take its place. She had not come this far, endured so much, only to give up now. This was a battle she had to win, not just for herself, but for Zain and for every woman trapped in a situation like hers. "What do we do?" she asked her lawyer, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "We fight," came the reply. "It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but we have options." "We can challenge the jurisdiction, argue that enforcing the Saudi ruling would be against public policy in the US. We can present evidence of the circumstances you fled from." Emily nodded, her mind already racing with plans. She would need to go public with her story, something she had avoided until now. It would mean exposing herself to scrutiny and potential danger, but if it meant keeping Zain safe and free, she would do it 1,000 times over. As she hung up the phone, Emily looked at Zain, playing happily with his toys, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. She scooped him up in her arms, holding him close. "It's not over yet, my love," she whispered. "But I promise you we're going to get through this, together." The battle ahead would be long and hard, a legal and emotional marathon that would test Emily's strength and resolve to their limits. But as she stood there, her son in her arms and the life they had built around them, Emily knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would never stop fighting for their freedom. The next 2 years of Emily's life were consumed by an intense legal battle that pushed her to her limits. The custody case became a high-profile international dispute, drawing attention from media outlets and human rights organizations around the world. Emily's decision to go public with her story was not an easy one, but it proved to be a turning point. Her account of life under Khalid's control, her daring escape, and her fight to protect Zayn resonated with people across the globe. Support poured in from unexpected quarters, women's rights activists, international legal experts, and even some progressive voices within Saudi Arabia itself. The legal proceedings were grueling. Khalid's team of high-powered lawyers argued that Emily had violated international law by taking Zayn out of Saudi Arabia without his father's consent. They painted her as an unstable mother who had endangered her child for selfish reasons. Emily's legal team countered with evidence of the controlling and abusive environment she had fled. They argued that returning Zayn to Saudi Arabia would put him at risk and violate his rights as a US citizen. The case became a battleground not just for Zayn's custody, but for the broader issues of women's rights and international law. Throughout it all, Emily struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy for Zayn. Now 4 years old, he was a bright, curious child who adored his mother, but sometimes asked difficult questions about his father and why they couldn't go back to the big house with the pretty garden. Emily's strength was tested daily. There were moments of despair when the legal obstacles seemed insurmountable, times when she questioned whether she had done the right thing. But every time she looked at Zayn, saw his smile and his innocence, she found the will to keep fighting. The turning point came unexpectedly. Khalid's sister, the one who had shown Emily kindness during her captivity, came forward with damning evidence of her brother's abusive behavior. Her testimony, given at great personal risk, provided crucial support to Emily's case. As the legal battle dragged on, public opinion increasingly swung in Emily's favor. The case became a rallying point for advocacy groups pushing for changes in international custody laws and greater protections for victims of domestic abuse. Finally, after months of hearings and deliberations, the court reached a decision. In a landmark ruling, the judge denied Khalid's petition for custody, citing the risk to Zayn's well-being and the circumstances of Emily's escape. The judgment emphasized the importance of considering the best interests of the child in international custody disputes, setting a precedent that would have far-reaching implications. The moment the verdict was announced, Emily broke down in tears of relief and joy. She hugged Zayn tightly, whispering promises of a safe and happy future. The nightmare that had hung over them for so long was finally over. In the aftermath of the ruling, Emily found herself thrust into a new role as an advocate for women's rights and legal reform. Her story had shone a spotlight on the challenges faced by women in restrictive societies and the complexities of international custody battles. She began speaking at conferences, writing articles, and working with organizations to help other women in similar situations. Zayn, now starting school, thrived in their new life. He was a happy, well-adjusted child, proud of his mother and the strength she had shown. Emily made sure he knew about his heritage, the good parts of the culture she had left behind, while also instilling in him the values of equality and respect that she had fought so hard for. As for Khalid, the publicity surrounding the case had damaged his reputation internationally. While he maintained his wealth and influence in Saudi Arabia, he faced increasing pressure both at home and abroad to address the issues raised by Emily's story. Years passed, and Emily watched Zayn grow into a compassionate, intelligent young man. She had rebuilt her career, becoming a respected nurse practitioner specializing in women's health. Their life was full of love, laughter, and the freedom they had risked everything for. One day, as they walked in the park near their home, Zayn, now a teenager, turned to his mother with a serious expression. "Mom," he said, "I want you to know that I understand now. What you did, what you went through, I'm proud of you." "And I'm grateful." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes as she hugged her son. "Everything I did was for you," she said softly. "For us. For the chance at a life where we could both be free to be ourselves." As they continued their walk, Emily reflected on their journey. It had been a path filled with danger, heartache, and seemingly insurmountable challenges. But it had also been a journey of courage, resilience, and ultimately triumph. She thought of all the women still trapped in situations like the one she had escaped, and renewed her commitment to fighting for their rights. Her story, she knew, was just one among many. But if it could inspire hope or change even one life, it was worth sharing. As the sun set on another day of their hard-won freedom, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. They had survived the storm, emerging stronger and more determined than ever. Whatever challenges the future might hold, she knew that together they could face anything. In that moment, watching Zayn laugh as he chased a butterfly, Emily realized that this simple, joyous freedom was the happy ending she had always dreamed of. Not a fairy tale, but a real, hard-fought victory that tasted all the sweeter for the battles they had endured. And so their story continued. Not an ending, but a new beginning, full of hope, love, and the precious gift of freedom.